Have fun.
So sorry.
And then I also wanted to say thank you to La Jolla Gardens for hosting us and Southwest Detroit Business Association for helping us coordinate this meeting, as well as the mayor who worked on this project. So I'll have some more information about this building and this project, and hopefully we'll be able to do an abbreviated tour after the meeting today for those that are interested in sticking around for just a little bit longer. Next one. So lunch is here. I was gonna go around the room and just do brief introductions. It sounds like there was a lot of good conversation happening already, but if folks are interested, could we just take 5 minutes or less and just go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves? And it's Jeff.
Oh, yeah, just pass it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Wong. I'm with Next Energy, and I work on our Michigan Clean Cities programs, focused on outreach and education opportunities about clean energy initiatives like this one today. I'll just keep it going.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Shepherd. I'm with multi-unit building in the Cass Corridor called Willie's Overland Homes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Verna Brooks from First City. It's the leasing. Take it down to Avenue.
So you might have to.
Hello, everyone. My name is Becca Arnold. I work with the City of Detroit Department of Public Works, managing our recycling programs. So if you own or manage any buildings that are multifamily and profit, small businesses, we have the cheapest program in the city. Starts at $37.50 per month. You cannot find that rate anywhere else for recycling. And we got lots of flyers, so come talk to us.
Oh. My name is Bill McQuick. I'm president and CEO of Police International, and I'm director of veteran services at the Constant Center. I'm up here to get with DTE about the building that's going up in 1723 West Grand Boulevard. And then we're in the closing process, so in the next few months, it should be starting.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shocker Mans. I'm an electrical engineer, certified engine manager, residential builder. I'm the owner of Flintstone Construction, where we redevelop distressed properties in and around the Detroit area with a focus on clean energy and affordability.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Dennis. I'm with Watermelon Energy Services. I support DTE multifamily programs here in the Detroit area to ensure that we saturate our community with energy efficiency.
Good afternoon, my name is Mary McCoy. I also assist Lisa with servicing DTE multifamily with Walker Miller, and I'm here to assist with getting wheels.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah Nassar. I am the mayoral fellow for Detroit Department of Public Works Solid Waste Division. I'm working with Becca to expand Detroit's commercial recycling program. So if anybody is interested, feel free to come and chat.
Hello, my name is Andrew Erickson. I'm with DTE. I am the program manager for the multifamily charter rebate program.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angela Best. I'm also a DTE. I manage several of our EV rebate programs. Hi, my name is Maya McCallum. I'm with MHT Housing. I'm a development manager.
Hi everyone, my name is Chase Noctanasio. I'm a policy manager with Clean Fuels Michigan. We're a nonprofit that advocates for the deployment of clean mobility technologies. You'll be hearing from me a little bit later talking about some of the exciting opportunities available at the state for EV charging of multifamily housing properties.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jason Christopher. I'm the building data analyst with Detroit 2030 District, and I'm also a Michigan climate fellow. And my role, I help building owners, property managers comply with Detroit's benchmarking ordinance.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm a property manager at Weston Mall. It's a new apartment community on 14th Street in Hebrew. And I'm here just to learn about the EV station today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Curtis Cochran. I am a community impact coordinator and also the property liaison for a multi-unit on New Jersey side, so thank you for having me.
Hi, my name is Peggy Matta. I'm an architect and I'm with, the founder of the Detroit 2030 District, and I was the, project manager for our, grant from NBC for EV chargers and solar.
Great, thank you, everybody. And so just to finish going through the agenda real quick, I'm gonna give a quick update from the Detroit 2030 district, and then Jeffrey's gonna present on Next Energy and Michigan Clean Cities. Chase is gonna talk a little bit about Clean Fuels Michigan and the Eagle grant that I mentioned, as well as clean energy tax credits. And then we'll hear from Andrew about the DTE multifamily EV charger rebates that are available. We'll have time at the end for questions, but if you feel like you have a burning question for any one of us presenters, just raise your hand. But we do have some time at the end for any and all questions. And then, unfortunately, our presenter who was going to present on this building, this development, had an emergency this morning and couldn't attend, but he sent me some information about the project, so I can share that with the group. And then again, that person was also going to give us a tour. We can still do a tour. It might just not be as in-depth on some of the energy specific work that they did in this project. But again, stick around for that if you're interested. So next slide.
Yep.
So briefly, I just wanted to talk about 2030 district's commitment to zero waste. So we hold a lot of small community events, and we're getting better at trying to use reusables, as you can see, with your lunch, and ask our caterer to use less plastic. So just wanted to let people know that this is something that we really try to do at all of our events. When we have larger events, we work with Huntington Place to take our compostable food waste. So again, something that District 2030 District is committed to is zero waste. Next slide. Next slide. All right, and just to introduce our team, you already met 3 of us. Feel free to find us. Again, I'm Kendall Kuhneman. You met Peggy Matta and Nathan Christerfield. Ben Rose is our other data manager. So he works remotely. He works with the Ann Arbor, Washington 2030 district as well as the Detroit 2030 district. So you may have interacted with him before in the past. Next slide. These are some of our board members. There might be some familiar faces on the screen, but we've got a great board of directors. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Detroit 2030 district and how we formed. Back in 2005, there was an architect who challenged other architects to design and build buildings better with the idea of reducing carbon emissions. And from that, the Department of Energy funded a pilot to start the Seattle 2030 district as the first district that would be a nonprofit that would support building owners and managers and helping them achieve carbon emission reductions. So Seattle was the first 2030 district. Detroit, I believe we were the 16th, if I remember correctly, and we launched in 2017. But again, the Architecture 2030 challenge is that all new building developments and major renovations shall be carbon neutral by 2030. So that's sort of the whole basis of where the 2030 district stemmed from. And yeah, a little bit more information about that, but you can visit either the 2030 Districts Network website or Architecture 2030 to find out more information. Next slide. So this is just a graphic that shows the 26 2030 districts that exist across the US. Like I said, Detroit was the 16th district to launch. Now we have 26 of them across the country. Next slide. And in Michigan, we're really excited to have 4 districts now. So earlier this year, the Lansing 2030 district launched. So I believe outside of Pennsylvania, we might be tied with Pennsylvania. We have the most 2030 districts in any state. Next slide. And so what is the 2030 district? So we're a private public partnership. We have 3 different member types. We have building owners and managers, that join our, hello.
Good morning, you can speak fast over here, no worries.
Thanks, and grab some lunch in the back. Yeah. So we have three different types of members that can join our program. Any property owner, and I should specify commercial, multifamily, industrial. Any property owner or manager can join our program at no cost as a building member. So I know we have several building members in the room today. And then we have professional stakeholders. So those are businesses that support us. Each year they sponsor us and they also support our mission in general. So we have professional stakeholders as well as community stakeholders, the other nonprofits in Detroit that we work with, partner with, such as Next Energy. And so, yeah, those are the three ways that anybody can join the 2030 district. Next slide. I know this is hard to see, these are just some current stats on Detroit 2030 district. Again, we launched in 2017. We had well over 70 million square feet enrolled in our program now, well over 600 buildings. We have more than 30 professional stakeholders that support us and over 40 community stakeholders that we partner with. And then we are the third largest 2030 district in the network, very closely behind, might be coming up in time with Cleveland for second place. So hopefully we'll get there maybe before the end of the year. And then we partner with the city of Detroit. So Tafira Rushton was supposed to be here and had to cancel this morning. She's the sustainability director of the city of Detroit. We partner with their team through a grant that we received from the state of Michigan to support building owners and managers in Detroit with complying with the city's new benchmarking ordinance. So I think a lot of you are familiar with that, but maybe not all of you. But the city does have an ordinance that now requires buildings of a certain square footage to report their annual energy and water data to the city. So this is something that buildings will do on an annual basis. And this is really going to help meet the goals of the Detroit climate strategies. So through this grant, we, the 2030 district, can provide free benchmarking support to nonprofits, affordable multifamily properties, houses of worship, and child care facilities. And so we've been doing this for the past year. Prior to the ordinance, we were doing this work, but we were running a voluntary benchmarking program. Next slide. This is just a photo from one of the data jams that we did with the city of Detroit. We went around to each district in Detroit and had these data jam meetings at recreation centers throughout the city where building owners and managers could receive support with the benchmarking work. Next slide. And then Peggy mentioned our EV charging pilot program. So we received grant funding from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and we partnered with Powering Michigan, DTE, Next Energy, and Michigan Clean Cities. And this was a pilot that has since ended, but we worked with 10 of our building members, and they each received, it's a dual port EV charging station at their locations. If you go to the next slide, Peggy, this map shows that we were able to achieve getting an EV charger installed, one in each district at one of our building member locations. So although we don't have funding to continue this program right now, we're hoping that this is something we can continue to go after funding resources so we can do more of this type of work in the future. And I wanted to talk about the Detroit Energy Challenge. So we partner every year, we partner with the City of Detroit Office of Sustainability and Michigan Battle of the Buildings to run something called the Detroit Energy Challenge. So this is voluntary, it's fun, it's competitive. We have at least one awardee in the room right now who's been awarded for this. So every year, as long as your energy and water data, water's optional, every year if you update your energy data in Energy Star Portfolio Manager and you've enrolled in the Detroit Energy Challenge, you have an opportunity to be recognized at either the state level or the local level here in Detroit for any sort of energy reduction or water reduction projects that you would have done. So it's all based on your utility data. That's how, and then also, documentation of a project that you've completed. But this is an opportunity for us to start to recognize the buildings that are doing these types of projects in Detroit. And we've had great participation in the past 4 years since we've launched it. So we've had actually an increase in Detroit buildings that are getting recognized at the state level as well. Next slide. So this is just a photo of this past year's awardees. And each year we do a awards breakfast, usually in June. So this was a great event and, we're able to award several great projects happening in Detroit. Fun. I have flyers in the back. I know this slide is hard to see. So this flyer is in the back if you want more information. But next year will be our 5th year anniversary. So we would love to get even more participation in Detroit. There's a QR code on that flyer, and that will take you directly to where you need to register. Once you register, you do not have to register again. You're automatically considered each year. All you need to do is make sure your utility data is updated. And yeah, there's, like I said, there's a QR code on that flyer in the back. Next one. So I wanted to very briefly talk about a few updates, and then I know Chase will get a little bit more into the clean energy tax credit topic. But first, I just wanted to make sure that everybody in the room is aware that Michigan adopted a new commercial energy code on April 22nd of this year. So this new energy code applies to all new buildings, all building additions, alterations of existing buildings, and then there is an exemption for historical buildings. So wanted to make everybody aware that this was adopted because it's going to impact a lot of projects. And so if you are doing any projects, even an alteration, you might want to start asking your contractor, asking the architect, whoever you're working with, about how the commercial energy code might impact your project upfront, ideally. And then there's just a few more bits of information on here, but one of the big takeaways for me, and I'm not an expert on the new commercial energy code, but one of the big things was something called functional performance testing and commissioning. So under this new commercial energy code, that's required for all buildings and projects. And then all building additions and alterations that are greater than 10,000 square feet need commissioning. So that's a really big piece of the commercial energy code. Next slide. And actually, one more thing about the commercial energy code, we were going to be doing training in July in partnership with the Michigan Green Building Collaborative. We didn't get a lot of registrations in Detroit. I think it was just the time of year of the holiday, the July 4th holiday. If there's interest from folks in doing the commercial energy code training, I think that there is interest. I think just the timing was bad, but that's something that we're possibly looking at doing if folks are interested in learning more about that code. And then again, I have two more brief slides. The clean energy tax credits update. Again, I'm not an expert in this space, but there's a few key things that I wanted to pull out for everybody. So electric vehicles, and forgive me if you are all already familiar with this, but the EV tax credits are going to be phased out after September 30th of this year. So the purchase of electric vehicles, in order to take advantage of the federal tax credit, needs to be no later than September 30th. And then electric vehicle charging must be in service no later than June 30th next year. And then regarding commercial solar and wind, it's been highly recommended that projects begin construction before December 31st of this year in order to avoid having to comply with something called the prohibited foreign entity restrictions. And so in order for a project to be considered beginning construction, it's being suggested that you incur or pay a minimum of 5% of the project cost. Or even potentially 10%. in order for your project to be considered beginning construction. So before December 31st of this year, in order to, not have to comply with the prohibited foreign entity restrictions. And, next slide, and this is my last slide on clean energy tax credits. A little bit more information about solar and wind and the timelines. So again, if construction begins before December 31st, the entity is eligible for tax credits and does not generally have to comply with the PFE restrictions. If construction begins after December 31st, yes, that's right, January 1st of next year through July 4th of next year, it must comply with those additional restrictions in order to be eligible for the tax credit. And then if construction begins after July 4th of next year through the end of 2027, it must be placed in service by December 31st of 2027 and comply with those PFE restrictions. So I just wanted to just make people aware of those few points. There's a lot more to it. I'm not the expert, but trying to make sure people understand generally what's going on with the clean energy tax credits. Next slide. And then, we're mostly focused in the commercial space, but similar timeframes for residential tax credits, with the home energy efficiency improvements having to be made before the end of this year, as well as solar. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank these are our professional stakeholders that I mentioned earlier that support us, our funders and our visionary partners. We also have our platinum partners and our gold partners that support our work. Next slide. And we have several silver partners as well. And then lastly, we have several statewide supporters that support all of the Michigan 2030 districts. So thank you to all of our professional stakeholders that are in the room. And then if you want to get involved with the 2030 district, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can become a member. You can enroll a building in your program. You can support us as a professional stakeholder or partner with us as a community stakeholder. You can become an event sponsor, join a committee or volunteer or donate. There's lots of ways to get involved. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey for the next slide, and I'm going to look everything.
As you should. I will use all the solutions. Everybody introduced myself earlier, but just as a reintroduction, my name is Jeffrey Long with Next Energy in Michigan Clean Cities. I'm a program analyst focusing on outreach and education opportunities like this one. And just a little bit of background on us. Michigan Clean Cities specifically is legally affiliated with the Federal Department of Energy. As a part of this network of clean cities and communities coalitions across the country, really focused on supporting different organizations that are local on the ground and different projects focused on lowering emissions and supporting the use of cleaner fuels and cleaner transportation options. We move on to the next slide. And through that, a lot of our support right now at this moment is embedded in EV-related programs, especially with these different tax credits that are expiring or are on their way out, kind of with the current federal landscape shifting, which I don't have to jump into too much if anyone keeps their radar on the news at all. But first of all, for those of you who maybe don't know as much about EVs, I want to do a little EV 101. So electric vehicles, there are kind of three different types of electric vehicles that you might see on the roads. There's hybrid electric vehicles that still really take gas, but they have an electric motor that can be fueled by gasoline still. So generally the biggest benefits for folks is that they don't have to focus on charging on the roads, but they get that fuel efficiency by having that electric motor to reduce the cost of gasoline. But the big focus right now for EVs is battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So plug-in hybrids still have that capability for gasoline, but can be plugged in as well through a charger, and we'll get to a little bit more about installing chargers at properties. And then fully battery electric vehicles are only charged up. They really only have an electric motor and don't take in gasoline. And so are electric vehicles practical? Do they make sense for folks on the road? Chase, I think we've teased like what he'll be presenting a little bit, but he'll be getting into kind of the federal landscape as well as locally where EVs are. But EVs, broadly speaking, are very practical, especially nowadays. The charging landscape, even what we worked with the Detroit 2030 district, is a lot different just in the past few years. Chargers are all over the place. I'm sure, you know, if you're just driving around here in Metro Detroit or in the city, you see electric vehicles on the roads. And it's not because they have to drive all the way home every time they want to charge up. There are chargers locally, publicly accessible. If you go by Myers have chargers now. They're very supportive of this. We're actually on another project in the city of Lansing to expand charging across the capital area region, right? In the city of Lansing, East Lansing, and even the outlying rural areas. So the charging landscape is a lot different right now. And then with these federal tax credits and the manufacturer support that the different OEMs have, the prices of EVs are starting to come down as well, especially as they develop newer models that are more, I guess, appealing to, you know, those middle class and even working class folks that need something that makes more sense for their daily commute and makes more sense for their budget. So all that trend is really going towards EVs, honestly. Is it completely there yet? No, and that's why the tax credits are a little disheartening to see. But even with the tax credits going away, we see folks who are interested in taking use of that opportunity. They're seeing them growing and saying, you know what, I want to get on this before I'm going to lose on this money. So we're actually seeing a huge rush of folks buying right now. What's it going to look like after? Great question, but we'll all be there to see. So some of the advantages to walk through EVs. So mechanical advantages. Because there's an electric motor instead of that fully diesel-powered, gasoline-powered motor, there's a lot less mechanical maintenance needs. So one example of that, again, it's really small text, so apologize for that, folks. But one of the examples of that is one-pedal driving that allows regenerative braking. So regenerative braking allows the energy that's usually lost, like for you to stop that car, stop the tires from moving on the road. It takes that energy back into the vehicle to be used for power, you know, seconds later, where you're going to be pushing on the pedal to keep the car going even further. So that's one example of what less wear and tear on the vehicle that allows drivers to hopefully go to a mechanic a little bit less and have less costs overall because of that. And that goes into the second part, your cost advantages. So again, less maintenance needs and then also less gasoline needs. We all see the price of gas. I do not enjoy going every week to get filled up, and it's not a fun time. And so that's one advantage of EVs as well. And finally, the environmental. Everyone knows less gasoline, less emissions, less pollution in the air, especially here around Detroit. We know that Detroit is one of the most polluted cities in America, especially with air quality. So anything we can do to help reduce these emissions is really great. There's another concern, obviously, with these batteries. We hear all the time, well, EVs are so great, yes, on the emission side. What about making those batteries, mining them? Studies have found from the University of Michigan that even if in that kind of life cycle analysis, from production of the battery and the car, if you look at the emissions that are reduced overall in the lifetime of that car, of folks owning it, reselling it, buying it as a used EV, it's still going to have lower emissions overall and more beneficial for the environment. So again, it just makes sense, EVs, less cost, and less burden on our communities. Next slide. Okay, and a little bit on EV charging infrastructure. So there's 3 different levels of EV charging. Level 1, here's approximately 5 to 10 miles of range per hour of charging. So it's the slowest one. But it also requires the least electrical kind of capacity for your property or for your building. Level 2, charging approximately 25, 30 miles of range per hour of charging. I'll say that again, as the manufacturers really push into electric vehicles more, the ability and capacity of these chargers are going to be increasing over time. And then the third level, you think they're just about level 3. They don't. But it's DC fast charging. Sometimes people just shorten it to DC-FC, and you get approximately, it's a wide range. It's a wide range depending on the charging plan on the car. 100 to 200 miles of range per half hour of charging. So that's the quickest one. The downside of that charging, so comparing to level 1, it requires the most electrical capacity, and it also can, do a big drain on that battery over the lifetime of it in your vehicle. So the more you use that DC fast charging, so throw all this power into your battery, the less time it's going to live overall for the lifetime of your car. So those are the 3 different levels. And for multifamily housing properties or even any residential property, level 2 is really where you're going to want to to be at, because it's kind of in between of the necessary electrical input and capacity that you need for the property. And, you know, hypothetically, you're charging this overnight, or maybe you're staying home one day because you got a sick kid, you'll be charging that during the day or during the night, and it'll be all charged up for you when you actually need to get it into use. Next slide, please. Okay, and then there's one very specific project that I want to share that I'm working on right now with Michigan Clean Cities, and it's also a federally related project. It's funded by the Department of Energy and managed by Ford, another kind of transportation electrification nonprofit that supports these missions. And they're paying for our food today, so thank you if they can hear me. So yeah, next slide. And Charge at Home is focused on sharing resources around EV charging at multifamily housing properties specifically. So that's really what the focus is here today and why we can get that done. So some of the resources that I'm sharing through this project are market segmented toolkits for EV installation. So are you a new development, you're an existing property, are you market rate, or are you affordable housing level? And these different toolkits really walk through developers, owners, managers on what you might need to think about if you want to install EV charging at your property. So those toolkits live on our website alongside educational one-pagers. So if you or other staff at your property, just don't know a bunch about EVs, you don't own one, you don't know anybody who owns one, what are they all about? We have some simple one-pagers kind of walking through what I just talked about with EVs, with EV charging. We even have a one-pager about parking configurations, depending on how your parking lot looks, you might need to set up your charger differently. So we have a one-pager about some possible examples that you can look at there. And then some case studies as well. I'll skip that now because I have a couple I'll touch on after this. Free property consultations. So over the next few weeks, we are doing virtual meetings with any property interested in just talking about EV installations. So we have a little project team that just sit into like a half-hour meeting, talk about what your questions are, what your concerns are, what your hopes are maybe for installing EV charging at your property. Feel free to reach out to me after this presentation today, and I can definitely get you connected with our team to have that meeting. And then on our website as well, we've been doing these roundtable sessions, basically webinars, talking through the different options about EV charging, and depending on your perspective as a stakeholder, what you might be engaged in at the most. Again, all of these resources are on our website at chargeathome.org. Charge at home. And yeah, chargeathome.org/tools. One specific tool I want to highlight is this project builder tool. So let's say you are busy, you don't want to jump into a meeting with us. I completely understand. I'm way too busy too. So you can just hop on our website and you want to just throw in some details about your property. Before I jump into this whole, finding an electrician and talking to us, seeing where, EV charging providers might cost me, let's just jump into this tool. What's the status of your property? Is it existing or is it in development? What type of housing is it? What kind of parking do you have? How many units do you have? What's your role at the property development to really understand where you might be able to impact change? You want to support EV charging your property. Those are all the kind of inputs that it'll take on this one screen. It's a screenshot of the actual project builder tool on our website. You hit submit and it'll shoot out some good information for you generally about the area, maybe possible contractors, funding opportunities that exist. Again, shout out to Chase. Chase is going to talk through one of them that is currently open at the state level. And then Andrew is going to be talking about, local utility incentives that are provided to install charging at your property too. So if you fill out this project builder tool, it will spit all this out to you in one page. And to save that and say, you know what, this is what I can share out. I don't need to do too much of the hard thinking yet. This is the start of EV charging. Just the start. Next slide for me. Okay, so a couple case studies, and I think I'm just going to focus on this one too. So the case studies are really meant on our website to provide you a look into how you might want to approach it. Everyone knows every property is different depending on the area you're at, depending on the market that you're in. So these case studies kind of give you a look into what different folks have looked at. So this one is from Oregon, and they were having some trouble with figuring out the wiring and electrical capacity for their chargers. So they realized that they couldn't necessarily have dedicated parking setups, and what they did was they connected their chargers actually directly to the meter instead of wiring it through, I believe it was a parking structure, like through the walls and everything. They had it aligned as close as possible to the meter. So what that does is it makes some of those construction costs a little lower, and it makes the need to dig up the ground and throw in some new wires a little lower as well. So it lets you have access to this EV charging resource for your residents at hopefully as minimal cost as possible. So this is one example of kind of the different situations that the case studies are trying to highlight and to just show you what are some options that I might have available to myself. And you can go, sorry, that's right, and then one more, yeah, you can do just skip over the next slide too, because this is another case study. You can find it on the website. Okay, and then that's where I'm gonna hand it off to Chase, with Greenfields, Michigan. I talk fast, you guys, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Chase Anastasio. With Greenfields, Michigan, we're a nonprofit trade association. We partner with businesses in the state that are really excited about deploying clean mobility technology and working toward Michigan's climate and economic goals in building, making sure that as the auto industry transitions into the future, that stakeholders like you all are brought along in that transition and participating as well. Go ahead to the next slide. You've heard a lot about what I'm going to talk about already, but just kind of give you guys a heads up. Going to talk about why now is the time to be investing and thinking about investing in EV infrastructure for multifamily housing properties, and then how to take advantage of some of the existing current incentives that are available to help support those projects. And then at the very end, I'll wrap up with, if you're interested in getting started, if I do my job in convincing you that EV charging is right for your project, I'll walk through some of the first steps about how to get involved and kick off an EV charging project at your property. Go to the next slide, please. All right, start up with Michigan's EV landscape. We can go to the first slide on the section. The first question, why EVs, and Jeffrey did a great job of kind of overdoing some of these things, but I again really want to talk about from a consumer perspective, why people are thinking about, why people are making the switch towards electric vehicles. And this is a survey that J.D. Howard did, asking consumers who purchased EVs, what was their main motivating factor? And the number one response was saving on gas, like Jeffrey mentioned. The numbers show that like an average gasoline driver driving an average vehicle can save $2,500 annually on fuel savings, because the cost of purchasing electricity to fuel an electric vehicle is so much cheaper than the cost in comparison of gasoline. And so I know when we talk about EVs, we're a lot of times in this kind of, especially with the political rhetoric recently, tree huggers, love EVs, they want to save the environment, they're not practical, they're not affordable. And we really just see that that isn't the case. And when people purchase and drive the vehicles themselves, they know that there are real legitimate cost savings to owning the vehicles. It has more electric vehicles come on the market, different price points, and used EVs are becoming more readily available, which I'll talk about later. The total cost of ownership of the vehicle, even with a little bit higher MSRP, because of these savings on fuel costs and lower maintenance and repair costs, it's actually cheaper over the life cycle of the vehicle for an owner to have it compared to the gasoline counterpart of that vehicle. Then last thing I'll flag with this slide here. Last year, again, we continue to break records for EV sales, both in Michigan and nationally. Last year, we broke 1 million electric vehicle sales across the country. I'm going to talk a little bit more, I think, on the next slide about EV adoption in Michigan specifically. So this chart was taken from Secretary of State data showing different vehicle registrations in Michigan from 2020 all the way to 2025. And then this column up here shows electric vehicles, so those battery electric vehicles, 85,000 battery electric vehicles registered in Michigan, and then 18,000 plug-in hybrid vehicles registered in Michigan. So currently about 100,000 vehicles, which is between 1 to 2% of all of the 8 million registered vehicles in Michigan total, need access to plugs and need access to charging. I'll also point out though, like the growth of these segments is pretty staggering. About 175% year over year battery electric sales. Something we continue to see growing at a strong rate. Plug-in hybrids again becoming a really common offering for OEMs. And then this section here is those hybrid electric vehicles that Jeffrey talked about that don't require a plug. So for our conversation today, we're just going to focus on the electric and the plug-in hybrid segments here. Talked a little bit earlier about the affordability of electric vehicles. Just a year or two ago, we're talking about are EVs really practical for everyday consumers because they have such a higher price point. You're looking at, for example, a Chevy Equinox EV compared to the Equinox gasoline or F-150 Lightning versus the F-150 base model. That's a gasoline vehicle. And one of the exciting developments in like of the affordability landscape of electric vehicles is one of the new number of models that are coming online. This is a little bit outdated. We have over 100 different electric vehicle models, both plug-in hybrid and battery electric models available for consumers now. And you can see it's significant growth from like just in 2020, there were less than 50 of these. And so OEMs are making more offerings, covering more segments. You know, these 50 vehicles were primarily in luxury and high-end segment of the auto market. We're seeing, you know, more breadth of the industry offering electrified versions of vehicles for consumers. So that's driving costs down. The other is the used EV inventory has been surging in just the last few years. So June 2024, so just about a year ago, 60% of the used EVs on the market were under $30,000. Over 30% of those were under $25,000 on resale. And again, as lease terms come up and things like that, there's gonna be a lot more low mileage used EVs on the market that are gonna be in this lower price point. It makes it more realistic for folks who are considering making the switch to EVs and bringing that cost parity between an ICE vehicle, a gasoline vehicle, and their EV counterpart. All right, and the last slide for this section, and I apologize because this graph is difficult to kind of get a grasp of at first, but I really find that it tells the story the best, and I haven't found a better graph yet, so I'll try to explain it as best I can. But essentially, this graph is showing EV charging behavior and where drivers of electric vehicles choose to charge their vehicles. It splits the graph here, so these are the battery electric vehicles, and these are plug-in hybrid vehicles split down the middle here, and then breaks them into segments, so we have vans, pickup trucks, SUVs, cars, and the same for battery electric. But what this is showing in each of these segments, so for car, battery electric vehicles, this top section here is for drivers of EVs who have residential access to EV charging, where they choose to charge, and the bottom segment is EV drivers who don't have access to residential charging, and that it's kind of hard to tell the color, but the first color here, this is a red, is residential EV charging. So in all of the different categories of vehicles, whether it's electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid, when residents have access to at-home charging, that is by far and large where drivers choose to plug in. Department of Energy, their estimate is that 80% of electric vehicle charging takes place at home. It's a huge benefit of having an EV. If you're someone who has one, or you know someone who has an EV, it's great to not have to be able to find a public charging station, or great to not have to go to a gas station, you know, equivalent. People love that they can come home, pull into their garage, their parking, wherever they're leaving their car overnight, and plug in. And we see that when people don't have access to residential charging, you know, they find other areas where their car is dwelling for a long time. So it's this yellow bar is workplace charging then. So again, an area where their car is dwelling for, you know, 8 hours a day, they're having access to charging that place. But just again, wanting to emphasize that at-home charging is by far the preference for EV drivers, and a huge motivator for people to actually consider whether or not they're going to be able to purchase an electric vehicle themselves. And so that's why conversations like these that we're having today and providing access to folks who live in multi-unit dwellings are less traditional. It's relatively simple to install a charger in a single family home garage, much more difficult, requires a lot more coordination at multi-unit dwellings. So that's why conversations like these are so important. Go to the next slide. Move forward one more. So my job now is to try and convince you, you know, obviously there's some interest if you're at this event in how EV charging, you know, might be a good fit at your properties, but want to make sure that I do my part as well. So here's some, you know, things you might consider, you know, if you're thinking about adopting EV charging at your property. The first is resident demand for EV charging. We talked earlier, we're seeing EV adoption growth both nationally and in Michigan. The vehicles are becoming more common. It's becoming a growing resident demand. A study that was done by the University of Michigan showed that in a survey of renters across the state, it showed that 58% of renters are willing to pay more for access to EV charging. And again, a lot of it comes down to consumer choice. Renters want to have the possibility or the opportunity to purchase an electric vehicle. The survey found that they view electric vehicle charging as an amenity that they would be willing to pay more for, similar to how they pay for other amenities that may be offered at the property. Another key motivator could be market differentiation. Again, I showed that when people have an electric vehicle, their preference by far is to charge at home. We're still early enough in the transition where people are actively seeking out, if they're an EV driver, which properties, if I'm looking to rent in the city of Detroit, which properties are going to provide access to EV charging, and that may drive their decision about whether or not they're going to rent at a property. And then the final is kind of boosting a property value, increasing rental income, again, because it's an additional amenity that can be offered, it can boost rental incomes. And then we also know that installing chargers is a boost to the property's property value. So those are some, why you might be motivated. And if you are motivated, these are some of the incentives that are available now. I apologize if the coloring isn't showing up the best on the screen. But I wanted to highlight there's kind of 3 buckets of funding. The first is federal tax credits, which I kind of walked through at the beginning, but I want to flag again the federal 30C tax credit is a property, an alternative fuel property investment tax credit. It can provide up to 30% or $100,000 in tax relief. And there's additional eligibility requirements based on the census tracts. And those kind of things. But as Kendall mentioned, I just wanted to flag, this tax credit was one of the ones that got targeted by the administration and is being phased out earlier than expected, with an expiration date of June 30th of next year. So we're now under a year, and the project has to be online before in service in that date in order to be eligible for that tax credit. So this is a stackable tax credit that can be stacked on top of the other incentives that I'll talk about in a second. But it's something if you're interested in taking advantage of, definitely something you want to be thinking sure that we're encouraging people to get those projects moving sooner rather than later. The other bucket of funding is utility programs. I know that Andrew's going to come up right after me and talk about the great programs available at DTE that he does a great job at managing. So I'll leave that to him. But again, just wanting to flag that across the state, utilities are offering different types of programs and rebates to incentivize charging in residential areas, including for multifamily housing. And then we can click to the next slide, but there's been a lot of allusions to this really exciting state program that I'm excited to talk to you guys and spend just a minute or two on this program. So the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy just last year received $30 million to increase access to EV charging in areas that are considered to be difficult to electrify. And they were really excited to tackle in their first kind of tranche of funding multifamily housing. So they have $5 million appropriated in a program that is currently available. You can apply right now if you wanted to, for multifamily housing properties with 2 or more units. So it's a really flexible program. There aren't really many more requirements of your property other than that. And it requires 30% match for properties that aren't located in environmental justice districts. But it could cover up to the full cost if you are in one of those tracks identified by the department. This again is stackable with incentives. So if your property doesn't fall on the track where 100% of the cost is eligible, stacking with some of these utility programs or with the federal tax credits could bring those costs still really close to nothing. And then rolling applications. So last update I received just a couple of weeks ago from the Michigan, the program managers that are running the state program, they have applications received for about $2.5 million of this program. So it's about half of what's currently available. It has to go through a review process before that, so it doesn't necessarily mean that all $2.5 million are expended just yet. But a lot of interest in the program to have about half of it done. The program has only been out since the beginning of the year. So really, there's a lot of interest in this program. Again, something I highly recommend if you're interested in, something worth taking a look at. And because the applications are rolling, again, it's better to get your applications in sooner rather than later. Go to the next slide. All right, I want to make sure we stay on track. So there's going to be a lot of information on the slides, but I'll try to move through quickly. But Cleveland, Michigan, with some of our partners, put together a charging installation checklist for multifamily housing properties. It's a resource guide that I'm highlighting on the slides here. We have a literal checklist. Like I'm a multifamily housing property manager. I don't know that much about EV charging, but I want to provide this amenity to my residents. I want to take advantage of the various different programs that are available. So we put a checklist together of the different things that you would want to go through step by step. in order to bring that project to life successfully. And so we had it split first into the planning phase, which talks about things, identifying your partners, your utilities, any contractors you might want to work with, those kinds of things, assessing resident demand, and then some other kind of review processes that Kendall talked, or Jeffrey talked a little bit about, that a lot of the resources he has that can help with identifying, how we can best prepare your property for EV charging. Next slide. The next part of the checklist is around installation, actually getting the chargers put in the ground, and then next slide. The last is around operation and things you just want to consider. Okay, now that your project is live, some other things that you might want to consider to make sure that the operation of that charging station is as successful as possible. Go to one more slide forward, but like I said, super glad to have this resource and something we love to share with folks like you. We have QR code here, but I would love to follow up with you if it's something you're interested in getting. We'd love to follow up with you afterwards and make sure that you have the link to this. And again, this is a resource that we developed with our partners at DTE and Consumers Energy and the Michigan Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, and always looking for opportunities to share this resource and, great names of people available to help, assist in your guys' endeavors to adopt multifamily housing charging. So I think that was my last slide. And yeah, again, would be happy to answer questions when we do the Q&A at the end, but I think I'm handing over to Andrew. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a reminder, my name is Andrew Erickson. I'm the BTC. I am the program manager for our Multifamily EV Charger rebate program. And I will jump right in. So at DTE, we offer two different rebate programs for multifamily. We have a low income and a non-low income rebate. The non-low income is a $14,400 rebate, and that is per charge port. So you'll see on the bottom right, kind of hard to make out in the picture. You have like dual charge ports, you've probably seen them around. It is per port, so for like one of those double stations, you get $28,800 for that, or for the non-low income, that is $5,000 per charge port. So you get about $10,000 for that, for just one of those. But to jump back into the low income rebate, we do offer a $14,400 rebate. You must meet one of the following low income requirements. You must be owned and managed by a public entity such as the Housing Commission. Be provided government subsidization such as the low income housing tax credit, or have at least 40% of your residents participated in the housing voucher program. If you don't qualify for that, we do provide the non-low income rebate, which is $5,000 per charge port. And we do, I'll jump into this a little bit, but we do stack with other charging programs as well. And we do require a minimum of 2 charge ports, but you can get up to 16, and depending on your property, we can go above that too. As I kind of mentioned, we do stack with other rebate programs. Specifically, Eagle is the biggest one. We talked about the Eagle funding just a moment ago, as well as the 30C tax credit. You can utilize the DTE rebate to cover the 30% that's required to match if you are not in a disadvantaged community. So let's say your project costs $100,000, you're putting 10 charge ports in, you get $50,000 from DTE, and then the rest can be covered by Eagle if it's approved by Eagle. So it would cover the entire cost of the installation theoretically. In addition to that, you can still utilize the 30C tax credit. And one of the requirements for the Eagle grant is that you do go through utility. There are certain exceptions depending on your property requirements, such as one of the requirements for our program is putting a second meter in. Certain chargers don't allow that, or your property characteristics might not allow that. So we might work around that with Eagle, but generally we stack with Eagle specifically. There are a couple requirements, as I kind of mentioned. For the charger specifications, we do require a level 2 charger that is rated 11.5 kilowatts or 48 amps. Generally, you can get a full charge on one of these EVs in about 7 hours, any of these new EVs. So we want to make this pretty readily available for multifamily tenants. So that can be your renters and whatnot, getting them charged overnight. We also do require them to be well listed and Energy Star rated. This is kind of just to ensure that you guys have a quality product that's not going to break down in the first 5 years, because that is another one of our requirements, is that you guys have the charger at a 97% uptime for about 5 years. On top of that, I mentioned that the minimum of 2 installed charge ports. We do want to see at least 2 charge ports, and we go up to 16, however, there are certain exceptions. And, one more thing on there, we also do require a second meter. It's one of the bigger things with the program this year, when we rolled it out in 2025. We look at that data, just to see what we expect to see on the grid going forward. And in the past, we did work with software providers, but unfortunately, in the past couple of years, a couple software providers went out. So one of the requirements is to have that second meter. You might be wondering what timing is for a lot of these projects. Kind of went over that a little bit in past slides. But working with Eagle and DTE, we're looking at about a 1.5 month to 6 month timing gap. This depends on quite a few factors. One being site characteristics, depending on your site, if you have any utility site upgrades that require extensive working, upgrades such as like trenching, concrete work, or service upgrades such as like a transformer upgrade or a panel upgrade or something along those lines, that might take more time to do. In addition to that, if you're applying for both the DTE rebate as well as the Eagle rebate, you should anticipate about a 5 to 6 month timeline just for all the approvals that it requires to get some of that, those rebates and grants approved. And then any city permits that you might need to pull specifically for Detroit or wherever you might be located. This is my contact information. We also do provide advisory services. So if any of you guys want to reach out, you have questions about the property or the program, I can work with you directly and help you figure out what chargers to go with. If you guys are looking at certain companies and stuff like that, help install them. We're here to help assist throughout the entire phase of your project, and ensure that you guys are able to get EV chargers in your multifamily properties. I also have business cards, so if anybody wants one, feel free to stop by. I'm also here for questions.
Thank you to all the presenters. Can I actually have all the presenters come up here, where we'll just pull some chairs up and do a Q&A, assuming that people have questions.
Yeah, maybe we'll be pulling up these chairs for now. Is that fine? Yeah, are there any questions?
Andrew, you mentioned, the rebate for qualifications for rebates for, low income housing specifically. The question I had is that if you're not receiving vouchers, but you're at 60% area median income, or do you have an area median income threshold that would qualify for rebate?
So it depends. Do you have a contract with Mishta specifically for that property?
No, my contract, well, I have, grant approval from NUDC based on the affordability and my affordability of 60%.
Depending on the AMI, we might be able to work with it. I would have to see the documentation. We do generally look through the Mishta documentation to just certify that there's a contract in place, because a lot of those receive credits for that AMI total. If you want to connect with me after, I'd be happy to walk through that with you. And we can look at that documentation to see if it would be approved for the low income rebate.
Are there any other questions from the group? Becca?
So we just got 2 EV heavy duty fleet. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on heavy duty EV transition and charging. But we are looking into purchasing more chargers just to get ahead of it. I'm curious to know, level 2, a DC fast charger for a single port system, what's the average cost?
Not me.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, what kind of heavy duty vehicles are there?
Refuse collection.
Refuse collection?
Transport.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be level 2 from my experience. It's gonna be DCFC, but then even depending on the vehicle, it might even be a little more specified. Like level 3 level charger essentially. I guess, yeah, I just have more questions, basically, which I don't know if we should
Well,
ask a little bit.
not necessarily for the heavy duty, I was just kind of mentioning that, but if we're gonna get more like Ford Lightning F-150,
Oh.
just like for a standard charger that's level 2 or the DCFC, what is the cost gonna be for those?
Yeah, like actually, yeah, I mean, it really depends, because That's the other part of why it's really important to have all these resources that we showed today, because it depends on a lot of different factors. Like Andrew touched a little bit on like for timeline, like trenching. So basically, where are you gonna have to dig up, where you have to put into the ground for these different chargers, you have to look at your electrical capacity right now. And how much electricity you can handle, so how many vehicles, the number, the type, is really important to know. I'll say, I hate throwing out a number because again, it's so property specific.
I can give you like more, so no trenching,
Yeah.
no trenching upgrades, one port, level two.
A level two.
Or
Yeah, I would say maybe, again, it depends on like your installer specifically, but I would say like a few, maybe like thousand for like project, I'm thinking of like also project level, because that's kind of where my brain goes. But if it's that simple, which like again, yeah, I would love if it's that simple. In the real world, usually there's something that you don't realize you need to do. Yeah, like maybe a few thousand,
is that 10 to 20?
Yeah.
That,
maybe a little under. Peggy has some good experience with this stuff. So.
We just put in 10 chargers around. The most expensive cost was $11,000 just for the installation. The charger unit, I think, ours were dual port, so it was like 5,000.
Yeah, which I'll say traditionally, it's gonna be a dual port anyways, that's what like charging companies are gonna have as a standard option for it. But yeah, again, if it's like super simple, yeah, like,
Yeah, and
I would, yeah, like max of 11,000, but I would say probably like less than
then
that.
maybe less, because it was between 8 and 11,000 depending. None of them required a panel upgrade. The easiest ones were the ones that actually just went to, they had to extend the conduit to a wall, next year, so that was around $8,000.
And Andrew touched on the multifamily rebates today, you also have.
And
I'll add to the estimates for L2s, our low income rebate was actually based on the expected cost or the average cost of a level 2 rebated, level 2 charger installation. So that $14,400 is supposed to take into account for all utility upgrades, and then any of the charger as well as the installation from the electrician. That $14,400 is supposed to ideally cover the cost. It is an average, obviously every property is different in what it takes to get it ready. But that 14.4 is kind of a good metric to fix, so.
And that for the multifamily center, that there should be a second meter starting in 2026, and that's just to monitor the EV charging stations.
Yes, so we don't look at it and be like, oh, you guys aren't charging enough on the grid. We only use it to we want to look at it just so we can project load. One of the big things in DTE is we want to understand how EV users are using the chargers. Are they charging during the day? Are they charging off peak hours? It has nothing to do with coming back to you like, oh, you're not getting your EV chargers and you said enough. We just want to ensure, we want to see and look at the data. When are they actually using it? When do we need to project to see them charging so we can figure out when we need to load the grid with more?
You have reporting requirements.
Hi, I'm curious about one of the case studies that you brought up, Jeffrey. Our building has 18 existing EV chargers that are tied to individual residence parking spaces, so they're not community. They really don't have any community parking spaces except for our visitor spots. And as EVs are becoming more popular, now we have more residents who want their own chargers, so and these are all tied into the common area charger, so the building service. As opposed to the unit service that you had mentioned in one of your case studies. So we think we've got capacity to add another 10, okay, so we'll have 20 chargers in our building. We have 66 units in the building, and as more and more people, the later adopters for this, they want to go EV, we might bump into a capacity issue with our DTE service. And we actually checked into increasing our capacity back in 2022 when we installed that first round. So my question is, what do you recommend? I'm curious more about that case study that you mentioned. if a building can't supply charging to all its residents because of parking logistics issues like this, how easy is it to say, well, I just want to plug into my own unit service and not go through the building? If we're gonna bump up against this problem, not sure how to handle it, and don't want to really kick the can down the road, without understanding possible solutions to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I don't think I have a perfect answer. I would be really curious. I would love to connect with you after and then also reach out to like our national partners on this project. Like I said, there's a national nonprofit that's actually working on this. That case study is out of Oregon, West Coast, obviously very far ahead on the clean energy space, EV stuff. So there must be a case study that's already existed of folks going through this thought process. I would say that, I think that gets into larger considerations for your property development about, expansion or how you, like, I'm also curious about how you have folks pay for charging there. Is it just like included as part of, like the utility bills for folks? Do you have like a software management system that's managed independently?
There's a sub-metering that charges back to the individual drivers.
Okay,
So because it all goes through our building service, we have to pay for our own kilowatt hours through that sub-metering, which is more complicated than if it just went on my own DTE bill. But we really didn't have that option because of the wiring challenges.
yeah. Yeah. Regional contractor.
Okay,
Unfortunately. So
it's pretty much like being that same boat down the road. It's we had to think of it.
I will say, great job on leading with the EV chargers. I love hearing that you have so many and that this is a problem for you, because I feel like I don't hear that often enough in Michigan. So yeah, I would also love to talk to you if you want to highlight all your obviously done.
Gonna say, I'll get Diana come and present this group on the project that they did. One other thing I wanted to mention before, I'm sure there's still questions, is that I forgot to put in my presentation is, Becca from the city is asking about, installing EV chargers at the municipal level. So I didn't mention that the clean energy tax credits are also available to tax exempt entities. And, that's through something called elective pay, which you can find more information on the Michigan Infrastructure Office about. But I also wanted to make an announcement, I guess. Yesterday, we found out that Detroit 2030 District was selected as the ambassador for Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties as an elected pay ambassador, which means over the next year, our organization is going to be working across those 3 counties and trying to get as many clean energy tax credits to tax exempt entities as possible. So brand new, not sure, how that's gonna roll out. We know we have limited time, but we're gonna try to help spread the word and get as many federal dollars to these projects as possible. So that's something that you'll be hearing more information from us on. And I need to have a better understanding of how the elective pay is applicable to multifamily properties too. So as we get more information, we'll be sending that out and communicating that to this group. Are there any other questions? Any other comments you guys wanted to make?
One little comment. Number one, just thank you everybody for coming out tonight and listening to us kind of talk your ears off. The biggest point I think is to say that if there's any interest or curiosity in EV charging, there's many folks, obviously here in this room, but all of our teams behind us that are interested in giving you whatever resource, whatever support you want. EV charging can be a big lift. We understand that, and that's why we want it to be very clear. There are many partners ready to jump into it with you if you're interested in it. I also just want to say thank you to the fellow panelists, and thank you to Kendall and the Detroit 23rd District for the event on.
Great. Food left over. There's some to-go boxes back there, so don't be shy if you'd like to take sandwiches or salad or cookies with you. And then also, are there folks interested in doing a quick building tour today, or is there any interest? A few of us will stick around, and those who are interested can as well. And I guess one other thing I'll mention too is that Detroit 2030 District has a couple of best practice groups, and multifamily is one of them. We also have a house of worship best practice group and a venue and museums best practice group. And so going forward, I would really like to convene this group on a quarterly basis or as frequently as people find it useful. So if you have topics that you'd like to hear about or presentations that you'd like to see, or if you'd like to host the next meeting, let me know, but I'd like to schedule these out in advance. We just had to pull this first one together and get organized, and so hopefully we'll be meeting more frequently going forward. So appreciate all of you spending your morning with us lunchtime, and hope you have a good rest of your day. And yeah, we'll send out the slides, and our contact info, and there's tons of support here. If you're at all considering these projects, or even if you just have more exploratory questions, reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would take it.